Now, Auckland's Eden Park will host a State of Origin rugby league clash next year, the first time the series has ever been played in New Zealand. The match is expected to draw a sellout crowd and deliver a significant economic boost for the region.
Auckland has managed to pinch one of the State of Origin games. I was so excited when I heard this. I couldn't believe it. Such a big deal to take a State of O game off Australia.
Really, the State of Origin is the jewel in the crown of Australian sport.
Kia ora, I'm Shalise Tansey, and today on The Detail, a look at why the NRL is going offshore to stage Australia's most iconic rugby league fixture. With me to talk about the state of the sport in this country is New Zealand Herald journalist and host of the Big League podcast, Nathan Lim. Are you a Queensland fan or a New South Wales fan?
New South Wales. I think.
Absolutely not.
So are you Queensland? So
Of course.
Why do you support Queensland?
Stick around to find out why Nathan and I support differing sides. But after months of speculation, the New Zealand government confirmed this week that State of Origin would make its way across the ditch to Eden Park in 2027. I asked Nathan what it means to Aotearoa to host such a quintessentially Australian game.
It is funny because a lot of people say, you go, well, hang on, why are we hosting it? Because New South Wales versus Queensland, two Australian territories, why are we hosting a State of Origin game? But New Zealanders are fanatical about State of Origin for whatever reason, and I think that weighs into the appetite for rugby league. And the Australian Rugby League have obviously, they've identified that in terms of it being financially viable. They wouldn't be bringing a State of Origin game to New Zealand unless they thought they could make a lot of money out of it. The money it's going to inject into the New Zealand economy, 17.4 million. Eden Park's obviously expected to sell out. So I think it's a really good thing to engage the game. We've seen the State of Origin generally over the last few years. They have taken one game away, whether it's to Perth or to wherever to try and expand the game. So this whole thing of bringing State of Origin to New Zealand, I think it's an acknowledgement not only of the rugby league fandom that is in New Zealand, but also that it could be financially viable to have these games coming here as well. And like I said, people, for whatever reason, New Zealanders really get around State of Origin. It is the highest level of the sport, really.
And it's just so engaging to watch. It's so rooted in history of Queensland versus New South Wales that it's just so entertaining to watch.
And I suppose New Zealanders are going to be engaged even more because they've changed the rule around whether you're eligible. So previously, if you wanted to represent New Zealand at an international level, you weren't able to play for either New South Wales or Queensland. You could if you were going to represent Tonga or Samoa. So I suppose since those nations have gotten stronger, people have gone, well, hang on, that's not really fair on New Zealand. But they've changed those rules now. So we should have more Kiwis, more New Zealand players who have that affiliation with New South Wales or Queensland playing in State of Origin. And that furthermore engages New Zealanders to go, oh, hang on, we've got Kiwis, our international players are in this as well. So we feel more part of it as well, even more so than we did beforehand anyway. So I think that'll help grow the State of Origin in New Zealand as well.
The rules have always been that you had to be born in New South Wales or Queensland or have lived there as a kid to be eligible for State of O. But if you had Kiwi roots and then went off to play for New Zealand, that disqualified you. Now players with English or Kiwi family connections can do both. The announcement about the rule change came out this week, around the same time as we found out we'd be getting a State of O game. I asked Nathan what Aussies think of the changes.
Australians are I've seen a couple things online. I think it's a few people are going, I think generally the consensus is that it's a fair call because at international level it just doesn't make sense. It isn't fair given how strong Tonga and Samoa are. Their representatives such as Jerome Luai, Brian To'o, Samoan players can play for New South Wales and then also represent Samoa. It's not the same for New Zealanders. So I think although people in Australia might be a bit like, oh, we're letting all the New Zealanders into our state competition, which is fair enough. But it is a necessary adjustment to even out the international game, and I think Australians do generally accept that.
Obviously, the game is being taken away from Australia. Is there a financial loss for the NRL having it not been played in a sort of neutral ground that potentially has a bigger stadium?
No, because the way the process worked is that it was a kind of a bidding war. So we don't know the specifics of who bid what, but it wouldn't take a genius to work out that the New Zealand government has obviously put up some money to be able to host the game.
The 2026 NRL season has already kicked off with the NRL All-Stars game held in Hamilton just yesterday and over the weekend, also supported by the government's Major Events Fund. New Zealand, as you know, has a very large and growing rugby league community, and I know there's going to be a lot of very, very excited Kiwis today.
The NRL officials are savvy enough to not take a game away to the point where it would lose them a whole lot of money. So I don't see that as I don't think that would be an issue, no.
What has the Australian commentary been like for taking the game international?
I think it's similar in terms of the changing of the state of origin rules. I think that there's a sort of a grudging sort of respect of, okay, we're growing the game, and then there's obviously a little bit of why is New Zealand getting it, which is actually similar to the kind of response that it had on this side of the Tasman as well. As we're New Zealand, why are we hosting an Australian regional game, effectively? But look, the NRL have made it clear for a number of years that they want to expand the game.
The NRL, as you know, they're hell-bent on expanding global interest in rugby league. We've got the NRL Vegas on February 28 this year, and I think the ongoing success of the Warriors is probably one of the reasons why they've decided to head across the ditch.
You might think, why are we playing in Vegas? It was because making money and expanding the game and trying to pierce that American market. I suspect they're also making a healthy sum off New Zealanders and Australians who are making the trip over, just quietly as well. And I think they'll have a fair amount of Australians who are making the jump and over to New Zealand for the game as well. So I'm sure the NRL has worked out a way to make that monetarily viable, as I sort of touched on. But yeah, there's a general consensus that the NRL has been wanting to expand the game as much as possible.
And it's working. Warriors home games are selling out. Last year, on average, game attendance was around 25,000 people, up from about 16,000 back in 2019, before COVID sent the Wars to Australia for a few years. What is it about the Warriors that has become so captivating? This is 81-year-old Anne Stevens, a lifelong Warriors fan and season ticket holder.
I was brought up in a family that my brothers played league. My parents were very involved in the Northcote Tigers, as it is now. When I was a little girl, about 3, I spent most of my life on the sideline of a rugby league field, and I loved the game from when I was a little girl. So when the Warriors started, I was one of the first people to buy into it. But what I love about league is really about family. At the end of a game, the families, the children run out. The players walk around and they talk to you and you have access to them. And it's an easy sport to follow. The rules are quite simple.
Let's go Warriors! Let's go Warriors!
Here to support the boys, as always, up the Wales.
We came to watch because the atmosphere is nice.
They win most of their games and I love the Warriors.
The Warriors have changed. They've really changed the psyche of sport here in New Zealand. They've done a fantastic job week in, week out, and really captured the public's imagination.
I think if you take it back to COVID, when the Warriors had to be based in Australia and they were over there for a good couple of years, and the situation was pretty dour. It was clear the team, the players were really unhappy. I can tell you as a fan and as a journalist, they weren't great to watch because they weren't getting results. They weren't playing particularly well. And when they came back over to New Zealand, there was a little change in coaches. Nathan Brown was in charge. He left. Stacey Jones finished the season. And from there, at the start of 2023, Andrew Webster, the current coach, took over. And it was almost like a reset of the franchise. And Andrew Webster has been able to completely sort of overhaul and reset the culture of the team, which ultimately is where this all starts, and that's impacted their on-field performances. I think what we've seen around the Warriors and the popularity of the Warriors is the fact that they're quite cool. Like, it is cool to be able to go to the game, to have this affiliation from the team. And you combine that with that streak they had in 2023 when they went all the way to the preliminary final. The Warriors had this massive surge in popularity. And I think what helps it is the fact that there is just one team in the NRL, there is one team that New Zealanders identify with, and that surge in popularity has cascaded onto the following season. So in 2024, they didn't have such a good year. They sold out every game at Mount Smart for the entire season. And that started with the team culture and the messages that they're putting out, I suppose, as a franchise. And I suppose they've weighed into what the NRL does really, really well as a competition, which is its branding and its marketing through a variety of different platforms over the ditch. I think it's something that Australians lean into really well. Is they lean into the controversy. So like if you following the NRL, you see stuff pop up on your phone all the time about contentious decisions, off-field incidents. And while that hasn't defined the Warriors at all in terms of the kind of content that they put out on social media, the way the players are marketed very personably, it makes people feel like they are invested in the team and they know the people involved. And that's been a big part of, I suppose, their rise in popularity over the last couple of years.
And you talked about this reset. I feel like this reset has really not cemented, but starting to cement NRL as potentially a very popular sport in New Zealand. Do you think we're going to see a boom of NRL in New Zealand?
I think, it's definitely already started. The NRL is clearly a massive rise in popularity. And, you talk about the competition between NRL and rugby for viewership. That's definitely already started.
Warriors coach Andrew Webster was asked for a code comparison by a former rugby league player.
Well, firstly, we certainly haven't killed rugby union, but the NRL versus Super Rugby is not even a competition. Where the NRL's way ahead of that in television and in audience. Actually, attendances on game day. But the All Blacks is still an absolute beast. But obviously they don't play as much as we do. That's probably the difference. Just more kids are playing rugby league. It's going as well as it ever has. Our attendances. And look, the Up the Wars movement's had a little bit to do with it, but New Zealanders are just more interested in rugby league in general.
Up the Wars! Up the Wars!
I think with the younger generation as well, it's definitely caught hold. For example, people my age, I'm in my mid-20s, what sport people my age are consuming primarily is the UFC, the NRL, the NBA, the Premier League football. So we're looking at sort of offshore competitions with a lot of money and a lot of sort of backing and they put out media on a whole bunch of different platforms. Basically, in simple terms, it's popping up on our phones all the time in a way that potentially rugby has, especially in New Zealand, has been a bit slower to sort of get accustomed to. And so I suppose when you're talking about the NRL's rise in popularity, again, it's the thing of the Warriors being New Zealand's team. And I think if that is to grow, potentially we need more New Zealand teams, more New Zealand involvement. That's something that's been pushed back a little bit because the Christchurch bids were unsuccessful in terms of the NRL expansion. Mm-hmm. But definitely it's something that started, and it's something that I suppose if you look at the product of rugby league, union has a lot of there's a lot of grey areas in the rules. If I watch rugby with my friends who aren't into sport so much, they're asking me questions all the time about why that was a penalty. Why was that a call? Whereas league is very, very simple to understand. You get 6 tackles, generally you kick on the 5th and then the other team has a go. So I think the simplicity in the rules and the clarity around it is also another big selling point of the sport, and that is definitely continuing to grow in New Zealand.
You mentioned earlier about the Warriors. Since the Warriors have started winning since 2023 or had that streak, there obviously have been a lot more fans engaged in the sport. Do you think the popularity of rugby league is reliant on the Warriors winning and those sort of, I want to say, bandwagon fans?
The Warriors winning is not hurting their popularity. I think it definitely, if the Warriors are doing really well, the sport as a whole is more popular. But I don't think it's entirely hinged on that. If you look at, I suppose, the international fixtures, the Pacific Series that we had, the Pacific Championship at the back end of last year, Eden Park was selling out, and it was selling out not with Kiwis fans, but with Tongan fans and Samoan fans who come in. And I suppose when you get a lot of families and stuff coming over from the Pacific Islanders, everyone gets lumped into being Warriors supporters. But as soon as it becomes country versus country, you see everyone's sort of colours coming out. And that had nothing to do with the Warriors, right? Selling out Eden Park for a Kiwis Tonga or a Kiwis Samoa test had nothing to do with the Warriors. So no, 100%, I don't think it is entirely hinged on the Warriors, but it definitely doesn't hurt because the Warriors and the NRL take up so much of the year and are the basis of when we're talking about rugby league, we're talking about the NRL, we're talking about the Warriors. So definitely it helps. It would be interesting to see, I suppose, where the popularity goes if the Warriors had a year where they just lost every game. But having said that, even when they weren't doing so well, go back through the 2010s, they would have a core contingent of fans that regardless of how the Warriors were performing would show up at Mount Smart every single week and would be loud and would be avid supporters. And then as they've done well, obviously the bandwagoners, as you said, sort of come on. But regardless, they have that base of support that seems to be loyal no matter what.
And you touched on, in a previous answer, Super Rugby and rugby in the country. And despite the fact that rugby league has become more popular in the country, New Zealanders still prefer their rugby. What is it, do you think, about rugby that as a nation we just can't seem to give up?
I think rugby, there's one thing that rugby has that no other sport in New Zealand will ever quite get, and that's the All Blacks and the pull that the All Blacks hold. Regardless of what's going on in domestic rugby or Super Rugby, when the All Blacks play, we as a nation sort of get around them and really identify with that team. And I think it's unrealistic to say that the Warriors or the Kiwis will ever be at quite that level given the brand that the All Blacks does. But as I sort of touched on before, rugby, I suppose at a lower level, doesn't have the same pull when you're looking at the sort of younger generation of sports viewers. No one's really watching NPC rugby. Hardly anyone is watching Super Rugby. I can tell you, people my age, we all get around and watch the All Blacks. When the All Blacks are on, people will get around, we'll have a group thing, everyone will watch the All Blacks. Part of this is the fact that young people aren't accessing traditional media in the same way that older generations are. I don't watch TV. I do not watch TV. If I watch something, I Chromecast from an app on my phone. I can't afford Sky. As a person in my mid-20s, and I can tell you I don't know anyone my age who has Sky who pays for it. I'm lucky enough that my dad let me have the password to my parents once so I can watch, thank goodness, through that. But it's not something that I'm doing on the daily. So TV ads, for example, don't reach me as a consumer. What reaches me is what pops up on my phone, on your social media feed. So those other sports, the NBA, Premier League, UFC, they're really good at circulating clips and controversy on social media. The NRL is doing that really well. So rugby, we have sort of a New Zealand kind of stoic, where we don't say a hell of a lot and we're all sort of proper and we're all humble. We don't say anything outrageous. The NRL is kind of the opposite. Aussies are a lot better leaning into the opposite of that. I suppose how rugby is marketed and packaged for an audience. You have ex-players who are giving their opinions and involved in the broadcast of the sport itself. In the NRL, it's a lot more of a mixture. So you have journalists, pundits, people who aren't necessarily former players, who aren't protecting relationships they have with current players or their past relationship with the jersey. And what you get is people who don't have those relationships, who are external in the media or whatever, who say things a lot more bluntly. And what that does, when you say something quite bluntly or quite controversial, is it creates headlines. It creates little clips that you can circulate on social media that people can comment on and engage with. It creates headlines in the news, and it creates stories outside of just this team won and this team lost. And that really helps to engage people on the regular through the midweek as well. And so those other sports really lean into that, rugby not so much. And I think that's part of why we're seeing this shift, I suppose, in terms of younger audiences. So that is up to rugby to kind of adjust to the current conditions and what can rugby do to stay relevant. But regardless, we've still got loads of people who are older who are watching Sky or are watching TV, Super Rugby, and that they're not going to have a crisis on their hands anytime soon, I don't think.
The NRL is pushing or trying to push the game further in New Zealand. We had the announcement this week, and we're seeing more matches outside of Auckland, with the Christchurch game already selling out 5 months in advance. And you also touched on us potentially needing a second team in New Zealand. Do you think that is something that we should be looking at in terms of expanding the game in New Zealand?
Yeah, 100%. There's clearly the appetite for it, right? And the Christchurch game always sells out and the crowd does really, really well. So there's clearly the appetite for rugby league down south and in other parts of the country. People are clearly engaged in it. So if you gave them a team, I think we can look at what's happened with the A-League, with the introduction of Auckland FC and the Wellington Phoenix, the rivalry that's been created, the fanatical, the port, that's come in for Auckland FC. There is 100% room for that in a rugby league sense. I think it will take a bit of time because, as I said, the 2 expansion spots, they've been taken by Papua New Guinea and the Perth side as well, which will come in a few years' time. But I think what we've seen, like I said, with the selling out of the Christchurch game, there's an appetite for it. If someone is able to put pen to paper and have the funding for it and the sort of mission and the plan, then it can be done. There were 3 bids for a South Island NRL side last year, and obviously none of them have eventuated, so it is definitely a process. But 100%, I think getting another New Zealand team will ignite the sport in a way that we potentially haven't seen, because at the moment the Warriors are the only team.
Are you a Queensland fan or a New South Wales fan?
New South Wales. I think.
Absolutely not.
So you Queensland. So why do you support Queensland?
Well, it's just a family thing. Granddad supports Queensland, so when the game popped up, I was like, Granddad, who do we support? Queensland. Okay.
See, and a lot of New Zealanders support Queensland, and that's, I think, because of a couple of factors. Sir Graham Lowe coaching Queensland, New Zealander obviously, but also I think New Zealanders like the underdog, and in the sort of 80s, the Queensland side would be routinely beaten by New South Wales. So I think you had a generation of Kiwis growing up going, oh, we want, the upset. And so people my age, a lot more people sort of my age in terms of your mid-20s, support New South Wales, because I've grown up where New South Wales lost every time.
Yep.
And so I wanted to just upset the sort of rhythm. And then there's the sort of the blue team versus the reddish team. So I'm seeing that as sort of like Auckland, Canterbury. I'm drawing some long bows here, but everyone will have a little different sort of quirky reason for whether you support Queensland or New South Wales. You said it's a family thing, obviously. So, it's interesting seeing people's reasons for it.
And one final question for Nathan. Is it the Warriors year? Is it our year?
I should have known I was going to get this question. Yes, it's the Warriors year.
Love
100%.
We are the power. We are the speed.
We got the skills, that's all we're gonna need. Get up and shout.
Say it to the end. We are the Warriors 100%. Woo!
That's it for today. The Detail is a newsroom production supported by RNZ and New Zealand On Air. Thank you to Nathan Lim. This episode was produced by Alexia Russell and Gwen McClure and engineered by William Saunders. I'm Shalice Tansey. Mā te wā.